So speaking of the dunking of the buns in the water, let's talk about the Nathan's famous hot dog eating competition. So for those of you guys that are listening, if you do not live under a rock, you must know that every 4th of July, the Nathan's famous hot dog eating competition is one where many people gather either A, in person, or B, like myself, watch it on TV when we are able to, or you just catch the highlights, right? So it takes place every year, again, on the 4th of July in New York on Coney Island. And as I mentioned earlier in part 1 and part 2 of this episode, obviously Miki, who's on this podcast episode, so I'm very grateful that she's joining us. Both her and Joey Chestnut are two of the most well-known and most famous in that hot dog eating competition to date. So first, before we even get into what you've been doing, what are your thoughts on Joey Chestnut? That man can eat, like, holy cow. And do you ever get to sit and watch the men's heat, or are you kind of just preparing and mentally getting ready for like your own competitions?
So the women's contest is actually held an hour before the men's. So by the time the men are eating, I'm just kind of like I've done some interviews, I've cooled off a little bit, and I typically watch from right in front of the stage. So in the last 4 years, I've been just cheering for Nick from the crowd like everybody else. And yeah, Joey's an incredible eater. He's probably like considered the best to ever do what we do. Got some amazing records under his belt. Obviously, he's unparalleled in hot dogs. So it's even more rewarding when like I get to beat him at certain events. He doesn't dominate every food.
That actually is a good point. You are correct. Obviously, you're the one that competes, but I do remember the women do go before the men, so it makes sense that you're able to watch the men's heat after you cool down and take a breather. You kind of already mentioned how you start to prepare for these competitions with your husband and whatnot. When you go into this competition, do you try to go in with it with a specific goal in mind? Is it always just to beat yourself the previous year, or what is your mindset for that going into it?
Yeah, I mean, my goals usually based on how I've been doing in practice. And the last 2 years, I mean, I guess this year and last year, practices kind of led me to think that like I'm going to hit 50, I'm going to do well. But obviously, come contest day with contest conditions, there's just factors that I can't control. So I go in with a goal, but I might really just over prepare for next year and still shoot for 50 because I mean, my personal best is 48 and a half, which I don't like the half to begin with. If you're to round up, 49 is just still a very like it's just so close to 50 that I just say 50 is my new goal. So I think 50 is going to be my new goal, but in order to actually hit that, I might just have to like prepare for like 57 and land at 50 or something like that.
That is a really good goal to put in mind. And the thought of eating that many hot dogs in one sitting, I mean, girl, I love me a good hot dog too, but that is a lot of hot dogs in one sitting. So I give you guys all the props for being able to do that. And I want to talk about this bun because we kind of already talked about it. I watch you guys, or my listeners that are tuning in that watch you guys do these competitions. It is incredible. Like, I'm going to give a quick little description if you guys haven't seen it, or go look up some highlights probably on YouTube or their social media. These people, right? They're sitting at this big long table. They have this guy with a top hat behind them, kind of like narrating what's going on. And next to each person, each competitor has their own person sitting next to them with kind of like a, not really like a tally sheet, but it like flips over with the number of hot dogs as they're eating it. So you can they're like live counting how many hot dogs that they're eating. And then you just watch these competitors and you're like, I can't believe these people are doing this. It's insane. So like they're taking the hot dogs, shoveling down their throat, taking the buns, dipping them into the water, and then putting them in their mouth. And like you just see some of these people like tears are running down their face. It's wild. So
It's intense, yeah.
So let's hear it from your perspective. When you walk up there, the people are next to you, you're shoveling these hot dogs down your throat. I just kind of described it from a watcher's perspective,
Yeah,
or
you did a
somebody
pretty
from
good
the
job.
audience. How was it from the competitors' side of things, though?
I mean, it's a whole day of high energy. I mean, from the morning from the time we wake up and we're doing interviews to leaving the hotel on the bus of champions to getting to Coney Island and running through and high-fiving the crowd. When I get on stage, when George Shea, the guy in the top hat, starts to read off or make his introduction for me, I just get really amped up and like it's just the crowd is like deafening right all around me, and I'm just kind of trying to like absorb it all appreciate the energy and just still like tune it out and like calm down at the same time. I run up the staircase with this ESPN camera right in my face. You walk across the catwalk, and I always go too fast. So like you're supposed to, for the whole duration of your intro, you're supposed to be walking across that catwalk. And I somehow like zoom past like the little X marked on where you're supposed to like strike your pose or whatever, like Miki Sudo, and you're supposed to stop and wave and whatever. I always run past that down to my station and start setting up my water because I'm the last person on stage, and the contest will basically start after my name is called. So it's always like this weird sense of being in a rush. I always feel a little bit panicked for that reason because I need to set up my hot liquids. But yeah, it's an amazing crowd. The energy is super cool, and it's hot and sticky and chaotic and loud, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
How do you get past the whole, like you said, right? You're feeling rushed. There's a big audience. Things are loud. Obviously, you're a seasoned veteran. So you've done this a multitude of times, and we'll talk about your records in a second. But whole feeling of like shoveling down again all these hot dogs, the soggy bun and the texture. What does that taste like? The soggy buns. I might just have to try one tomorrow just to taste
You
it.
should. You should. And everybody has their own preference. But I like to dunk my buns in warm water because it absorbs faster. It just lubricates them better. But I use warm strawberry, orange, banana flavored drink mix, and it's sugar free, so it's actually not sticky. But yeah, I have this very specific flavor that I use for dunking. You know, honestly, Nathan's hot dogs are delicious. Soggy buns are not delicious, but I mean, it's all part of it. You know, the bun's your drink, so you just make it work. It's functional.
I had no idea that you guys had flavored water. So that's a good little tidbit we are now learning. Are you one of the only ones that does the flavored water?
So Nick likes his pineapple, orange, mango. I think he's moving into regular water now, so he's switching up his. But I mean, yeah, I've seen things like there's a girl who uses Sprite. I've seen a lot of guys use Powerade and Gatorade. So it's just like a personal preference thing. I think for me, like I just tried a bunch of different flavors, and that's the one that worked. So now, like, why mess with something that's been working this whole time? Honestly, it was a lot of trial and error because I thought, like, you know, lemonades might taste good or like raspberry iced tea would be good. And some of them are just like, I don't know. It's just like an instant no. I landed on one flavor, and that's basically how that evolved. I use different flavors for like different foods. Like if I'm doing a donut eating contest because it's so sweet, I'll use unsweetened coffee. Or if I'm doing chicken wings, sometimes I like to have chocolate milk because we get some really hot and tangy wing sauce sometimes. So chocolate milk cuts that. I mean, it's just a personal preference, but what works for me isn't going to work for, you know, everybody by default.
Good to know. And I'm glad I asked that question because honestly, I had no idea. And I'm sure a lot of my listeners that are tuning in right now to this podcast didn't know that little secret either. I thought it was just everybody was drinking cold water and that was it. So that's a cool little tidbit for fans to learn about. And let's talk about the fact that if you guys are watching this on YouTube or if you're just listening right now on the podcast, Miki is sitting here. She's looking gorgeous. She has a blue tank top on. She's got some pretty highlights and a nice tan. But directly behind her, I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, I think 5 or 6 belts. I don't know how many are back there. But she is a 9-time Nathan's Hot Dog Eating Competition champion. So we're going to talk about her belts, winning these championships, and how does it feel to hold record after record after record?
Right now I have 8 belts up. The 9th one hasn't found a home yet. And actually, I've got Abel Skeever's corn dogs, a wing belt. Nick has his pistachio belt. I just won the 4 Thailand. They're plates. They're like these big silver plates instead of belts. Those are cool. Yeah, I mean, all the hardware is really, really fun. I like belts the most. Those are most, then trophies, large novelty checks. But, you know, the hardware is cool, but I like cheesily people like, you know, the best trophy that I get was like my husband and my baby. So I don't know.
That is so cute. Well, I guess that's true, right? Because you wouldn't have your baby if you didn't meet your husband, and your husband, you guys met through these food eating competitions.
Yeah, combative eating, yeah.
Kind of wrap up the Nathan's hot dog competitions because I know we're going a little bit out of time, but you're doing an excellent job at answering so well that we are going a little bit longer than I anticipated, but you are doing amazing. And again, I'm the type of person that likes to have my guests on here multiple times. So whether that be once a year, once every other year, to kind of recap what you guys are up to. I like to consider my podcast an audible reality TV show in the sense that I like to keep up with what people are doing. So like I said, in the future, love to have you and your husband maybe on here together. We have to ask this question, of course. Are we going to see you and maybe even your husband this upcoming 4th of July of 2024. Are you guys allowed to talk about the fact that you might compete in the new year, or do you guys have to keep that a secret?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm going to be doing Nathan's for as long as it's fun. So I don't see myself stopping anytime soon. Like I mentioned earlier in the podcast, like we exert a lot of energy doing what we do. Joey's older than me and he's been doing it for longer, so he's kind of like my guinea pig mentally. So he's still going strong. I'm still good. But when that day comes that, I have to hang it up, for that reason back in school. But with that said, everybody's off on the 4th of July. I mean, I'm always going to make time for Nathan's. So yeah, I'm competing. I'll be defending, going for my 10th belt, right? Yeah, 10th belt. It'll be my 11th year at Nathan's, but obviously the year that I was pregnant, I didn't collect one of these. And Nick will be there for sure. He is actually thinking about like starting hot dog practices like in a month or so. I might actually start practicing with him just because it's kind of like you get bitten by the bug when somebody like in your household starts doing that already. But yeah, we'll definitely be there, and a lot of a few events in between, with one coming up in just about a week or so.
So if you guys weren't at Nathan's and you're just at a cookout for fun, obviously you're not going to be competitively eating, but if there were like Nathan's hot dogs or some other type of hot dog or even like a burger, I know you mentioned that you don't really eat that much when you're just eating for like pleasure, I guess, or just eating normally. On average, like how many hot dogs would you and your husband eat if you guys were just out normally?
I mean, if we're at like a 4th of July cookout, like a barbecue for whatever reason, I might have like 2 burgers, or if I'm eating hot dogs, like 3 hot dogs, or maybe like a burger and 2 hot dogs, or some combination of those. I don't know, it depends what's being served, but yeah, I'm definitely not dunking the buns or anything weird like that.
Interesting enough, I had to ask because you guys are now listening to the fact that they can eat normally too, whatever your normal happens to be. But I feel like most average people will eat a couple burgers and a couple hot dogs. But it is cool to know that
Yeah.
you're able to stretch your stomach and compete.
No, I was just gonna say, like, yeah, and Nick and I like make it a point, like whether it's like a Thanksgiving dinner or like basically anything where you're serving yourself, like we'll make it a point to go last or as close to last as possible because like we don't want people to think like, oh, they're just here for the food and like they're gonna jump in and take everything and leave something for us and blah 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 blah. So it's just like it's just easier if we go last, get our normal little portion, and just like put all that to bed.
Well, thank you so much for sharing everything, all things Nathan's famous hot dog eating competition. I mean, again, you guys already know this, but it happens each year on the 4th of July. And I know that I look forward to seeing you guys compete in 2024, and I'm sure my listeners are as well. So I look forward to keeping up and seeing what happens throughout the rest of 2023 and when you guys compete in 2024. You've already kind of mentioned you have some food competitions coming up for the remainder of the year. So as we start to wrap up this podcast episode, the 2-part podcast special featuring you, any end of the summer family plans? Are you guys going to be doing any more traveling?
Yeah, so over Labor Day weekend, we'll be in Buffalo, New York for the home of the original Buffalo Wing Fest for like a charitable partners event on the 1st. Competitions on the 2nd and 3rd, and then flying back on the 4th, from what I remember. It's really fun because it's a 2-part event with some amazing sponsors, all to benefit like at Alzheimer's. The charity is centered around Alzheimer's, so it's a good cause too. First day is buffet bowl, like first to finish 5 pounds of buffalo cuisine. The second day is a 12-minute wing eating contest, and it draws like the best of the best. We'll be competing against Joey. Max will be there, so it's going to be a great event. But other than that, yeah, we've got tamales in Texas at the end of September. Nick might be doing a pork roll eating contest in Trenton, New Jersey. So pretty full contest through October. And then our schedule's a little bit up in the air, but I don't know, just lots of fun things planned.
Well, best of luck to you guys. And it sounds like you have a lot of great things on the horizon. And I know you kind of already lightly poked the bear about charity. A big part of this podcast is I do like to talk about how my special guests give back. Prior to my show becoming more virtual like it is now, back in the day, I used to do the show live in studio when it was strictly in the Boston, Massachusetts area, which is where I'm from. My best friend and I used to having people back in studio when they're local. But the reason why I bring it up is back in the day, my friends and I used to actually cover live charity events, and we really enjoyed showcasing different charitable events locally. So with that being said, I like to keep that part of this podcast alive and ask my special guests, how do you guys give back? And I know you kind of already mentioned a lot of the times you're doing these food competitions, there's a charity built into it. So how do you and your husband give back? And what are some of the charities that you guys work alongside?
So one of our really exciting upcoming projects, it's still like in the early developmental stages. But we're looking to partner with Forgotten Angels, which is a organization here in Florida run by an amazing couple. It basically benefits individuals, like young adults who are aging out of the foster care system. That's kind of like a really cool emerging partnership that we have in the works. Other than that, we've worked with Make-A-Wish Foundation. They were kind enough to have us out for Wings for Wishes, a wing eating competition held in Miami. There are various food banks across the country. Food Bank of New York, obviously, for Nathan's. In Toronto, we worked with Friends of We Care, Feeding America. So yeah, it's they're largely event-based, but I think we're really looking forward to this partnership with Forgotten Angels. So it's excited about sharing that with your audience coming up real soon.
That is perfect. Thank you so much for sharing that. And again, I have fully enjoyed having you on here for this 2-part podcast special. As we fully wrap up, I love to do something called Positive Pop. So each one of my episodes, I love to wrap up with what is my special guest, in your case, Miki, your positive pop. And that can be anything. I don't know if you're spiritual, so I don't know if you read the Bible or if you have a special book that you enjoy reading, or like a song that gets you hyped up, or maybe it's just giving your husband and your son like a special hug, or if there's like a mantra, like what gets you hyped up when you're not feeling the best on certain days?
Oh my gosh. I mean, when I'm not feeling the best, like I just need to walk into the other room or pull up a picture of my phone of my son, because his like big goofy smile just that can cure everything. So that's like my go-to. But you know, when things get tough, like a lot of times I'll tell myself mid-competition, pretty applicable to life too. Like when things get hard, like say I'm eating hot dogs, right? It's just like, and I just want to give up because it's hot and I'm tired or I'm full or I don't feel well or something like that. And it's just like, this is not where you stop. This is not where you give up. You know, if it's difficult, good. It's just an opportunity to show what you're made of. And I think like whether I'm eating hot dogs or donuts or just going through life and it throws me like a crappy curveball, you know, like just kind of telling myself like, this isn't where you give up. This isn't the end of your story. Like that kind of gets me through those tough moments. So, you know, maybe somebody can relate to that.
That is amazing and some excellent positive pop, a great way to end this episode. And I'm sure people and my listeners will find that very relatable. Once again, Miki, I want to thank you for coming on here. You were a fantastic guest.
Thanks for having me.